And for more on how the U.S. election could impact Canada, I'm joined now by CTV News political commentator Scott Reid. Hey, Scott, good to see you today.
Hi, Lindsay.
So I want to get into Canada-U.S. relations and also play the hypothetical game of what happens if each candidate wins. But first of all, even just throughout the campaign, and probably before that too, you kind of notice the shift in mentality even when it comes to people here compared to south of the border. What happens south of the border seems to kind of trend up here when it comes to how we talk, how we look at each other, how we act, and even how we look at our own politics here, right? Can you talk about that shift in mentality, really?
Yeah, no question. I mean, Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau used to say that when the United States catches a cold, we get the flu. And I think that's what the shift in mood is here in Canada. People are anxious. They're watching this U.S. election. They can tell that it truly is an election unlike any other, that the stakes are high. They're high for us economically. They're high for us in terms of democratic process, in terms of rule of law, in terms of international and global policies. And so, when 70 to 80% of Canadians fear a second Trump presidency, it's not surprising that we're looking toward Tuesday with real white knuckle anxiety.
Okay, so let's talk about that. We'll play the hypothetical game then, starting with Donald Trump. If he were to win the election this week, how would that affect Canada-U.S. relations here?
Well, it would make them bad. It would make them worse. It would make them particularly unpredictable. And here's the thing, Lindsay, people like to say things like, well, you know what, no matter who wins the White House, we're going to face challenges. Yeah, sure, that's true. But if Donald Trump wins the White House, just go down the list. Here's the rational things that we know that he said. He wants to impose a 10% import tax across the board on everything that comes into the U.S. That would be devastating for industries from lumber to manufacturing to energy. Very bad for us. Then we need to renegotiate free trade, CUSA, the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement with the United States in 2026. That ain't going to be easy with an unpredictable partner like Donald Trump. And then think about NATO, you think about bilateral, NORAD, you think about all of these relationships and the intertwine of our economies. And on top of it, and here's the fundamental difference, Donald Trump is not a rational actor. Dealing with him is not a predictable manner. You can't say, well, if we go to these three senators, we know they have sway and can put pressure on him. It is not clear what will put pressure on Donald Trump, what influences will affect him in the second term, because he has served notice that he will be unfettered and unfiltered. He will not permit himself to be constrained in any way like he did in his first term. So look out. It's going to be a total Yahtzee in terms of dealing with a Trump White House.
Okay, and if Kamala Harris were to win the election, would things change a lot, do you think, compared to right now with Joe Biden in that seat?
To be honest, I don't think they would change dramatically. You might see some intensification of, some of their more protectionist policies. An important thing to look for if Kamala Harris wins the presidency is, what does Congress look like? Do the Republicans continue to hold the House of Representatives and the Democrats continue to hold the Senate? Will the Republicans hold both houses of Congress and she holds the White House? That will mean a lot in terms of where we place our focus as a country, because, if you end up with a split U.S. Presidency and Congress, then in a weird way, that kind of helps us. We might face more protectionist pressures, but we can play one off the other. We can go to states where we have friends, whether they're Republicans or Democrats who are in, the governorships there, and we can work our way through the set of issues that we have in a rational manner. Doesn't mean it's going to be a picnic, but I would watch for not just who wins the presidency in terms of Kamala Harris, but who else is in control in the congressional and the Senate houses.
And also who's in control here as well, right? I mean, you have to think about the fact that we've got a federal election coming up soon. Like, with Justin Trudeau's prime minister, things could go one way, and then with someone else's prime minister, things could go a different way. So that has to be factored in as well, that things could really be changing in the next year or so.
Well, for sure. And, we'll see differences of opinion between those two leaders, Pierre Poilievre and Justin Trudeau, because let's assume for the sake of discussion, just to make it more interesting rather than less, that Trump wins. Well, if Trump is aggressive in his policies toward Canada immediately, right out of the box, then Justin Trudeau will have no choice but to be aggressive in response. We'll have to slap countervailing tariffs on the United States. We'll have to up our rhetoric. People will say, oh, look, Trudeau's on the ropes politically. The only reason he's doing this is to try to gain favor with political opponents or with political audiences. And then, of course, Poilievre will say, well, I would chart a different course. Well, what would your different course be? You're going to have to defend national interests also. So it's going to be very, very challenging no matter who's leading Canada. But we know that in the aftermath of this election, it will be Trudeau. And it's going to put him right up against a wall. If Canada's interests are at stake, he's going to have to come, and he's going to have to come hard.
Scott, just before I let you go, I should have warned you I was going to do this before we had you on, but I always like to get your prediction. So what do you think is going to happen on Tuesday? What do you think, who's going to win?
I'm not supposed to look down on TV, I know, but good grief, man. Listen, here's the way I look at it. It is too close to call. It is entirely unpredictable. Polls are of zero use to us now. I am choosing to believe that Harris will win. I think that's in the best interest of Canada. It's definitely my personal preference. And I think she's going to win. If I'm right, the reason she'll win is that the bro vote won't come out quite as strong for Trump, and women will come out. And remember, since the Dobbs decision, since the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade and a woman's right to choice, there has not been an election that has not been a driving factor in terms of turnout. It has driven women to the polls. It has harmed the Republican Party. It has helped the Democratic Party. I think in a couple of those swing states, Michigan in particular, possibly even Georgia, that could be the tipping balance, and the Harris will win, maybe by a bigger margin than people think in the Electoral College, but by close margins when it comes to popular vote.
All right, you're right, though. It is pretty close. So we'll have to wait and see, and we will see soon enough. That is our CTV News political commentator, Scott Reid, joining us. Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Lindsay.